Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Maybe I Can podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Weiss, and today I have with me a wonderful guest. Her name is Janice Goldmintz. She's the founder of Talk About Aging. She helps children and their aging parents get in sync any age, any stage. Her master's degree is in gerontology, and that's given her wide insight into what can be done to assist our seniors in creating the highest quality of life possible, no matter what the challenges may be. As a child of aging parents, Janice has had to sift through a myriad of options, changes, and emotional situations. Janice provides a way to navigate through the overwhelm, whether from medical issues, family dynamics, and or work-life issues. So welcome, Janice.
Thanks for having me, Debbie.
Absolutely.
Here.
Absolutely. So I have a million thoughts of things I want to ask you, but let's start with my first question, which is, could you tell us about a time when you went from a defeated I can't attitude to an empowered maybe I can attitude?
Sure. And I think a lot of people will understand this. I'm on the older spectrum myself when it comes to technology. And I was faced with learning a new computer system. And I think the first time I looked at it, I thought, this is not English. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to press. I don't know what to do. There's no way I'm going to learn this thing. And other people are like, no, you just do this and you click here and you go there and don't you see that? And I just thought, I can't do this. My eyes glazed over. I just was in panic mode. And I had to sort of sit back and say, all right, I have to be able to do this. Like there has to be, if they can do it, I can do it. I just had to because that's my stubbornness. And over time, with help, I was able to do it. And I did ask questions and allowed myself to appear less than knowledgeable, which that facade had to fall away. And now I'm good at it. But it took my own mindset shifting, going, okay, bottom line, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I going to do about it? This is an important thing for me to learn. I got to figure it out. And then doing those steps and figuring out how to make it work. And then it's now I'm helping other people do it. So
Isn't that always funny how that winds up happening? That
Yeah.
you somehow get to the other side and you don't even remember when you were thinking, I can't do this.
For sure.
Yeah. Wonderful. So let me ask you, because I'm curious about your master's degree in gerontology. What was your background prior and what made you, why were you interested? Did it have to do with your own personal situation at the time?
So this is an interesting story. I'll put it that way. My initial degree that I had from university was in business. It was like in commerce. And very long story short, I ended up moving to Buffalo, New York. I'm from Toronto, to be with a man who happened to be a geriatrician.
Oh.
And my intent was to help him because he was doing health fairs and he wasn't knowledgeable in marketing them and knowing how to set them up and get them going. And I said, oh, I can help you with that. And that was really what my initial role was in with what he did. But I started watching him with his patients. I started getting to know them. I started understanding more about how we age and what works and what doesn't and all of that. And I became fascinated. I got to interact with the patients. I got to go to these health fairs and listen to how much of a difference he was making for them in their lives. And I thought, well, at the time I was in my 40s and I thought, I can't go to medical school. I can't make that difference, but what can I do to make a difference? And I ended up going back to school and getting that master's degree in gerontology because I wanted to be able to do those presentations and to have that information out there, which is not readily available to people, and make that more accessible. So that's how that happened.
And I love that you did it in your 40s. You didn't let your age stop you, right? Because so many of us say it's too late and it's never too late, right? That's wonderful. And I don't know, I'm sure you know the statistic of the incredible percentage of our population is aging.
Yes.
And I can speak personally, when it starts to happen, you're really thrust into a world that you really don't know anything about, most likely, right? I mean, between
Right.
all the different, and it's different, obviously, in the US compared to Canada, but here with the Medicare and the Medicaid and the Social Security and the disability or whatever that is, and then finding the proper care depending
Right.
upon your family member. There's just so many challenges. It's nice to know do you know, is the master's degree or the degree in gerontology something that is widely available?
It is. So in Canada, it is not available at all. It does not exist in Canada. My degree is from Kansas State University.
Oh,
There is, trying to think, there's only a few universities, even in the US. And if you want a PhD in gerontology, there's even less. There's one university in Canada, Simon Fraser in BC, that offers it, but nowhere else. So when I came back to Canada and I said, I have a master's degree in gerontology, and everybody looked at me like, what is that? We don't
yeah.
have that here. And they don't, because it's not a regulated degree. Like if you are a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, a social worker, there's a board of governance that looks over these things. Well, my degree, nobody knew what to do with me because I have no board of governance. I'm this kind of an oddball. So that's one thing. And one thing that I noticed very different from the US to Canada is in the US, the insurance companies really want to do things to keep their clients out of the hospital, out of the doctor's office. And so they're more proactive in getting information out there. And I found it was a lot easier when I was in the US to bring information to people. In Canada, the idea is, well, the government's going to take care of me, so I don't really need to know. And I see that, and I see the big difference in that people don't have that proactive information and aren't used to having somebody come up and talk about diet and exercise and what happens if what kind of memory issues should you be worried about, and should you stay in your home or should you go? In the US, insurance companies and other people are really interested in getting that out there for the benefit of their clients, but I don't see that in Canada. So that's why I feel that what I do is important to get that message out everywhere. And I'm accessible worldwide because of Zoom.
Which is so nice and great that you know both countries' systems and differences, because obviously
Right.
it's very, very important. So you're basically a coach to people children
Children
or
of aging
aging
parents.
parents.
Yeah.
Which I've got to say, you don't realize how you need that kind of support. And as many listeners might know, I've been a caregiver for so many years and started at a young age with my father. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And I mean, from a personal experience, I found it overtook my life because I cared. So I love my father, right? We love our family members, and that's why we're called to help and do whatever we can. But talk a little bit first about what it's like for that child of an aging parent. And I think that having a coach to walk you through it right there is a tremendous asset, because now you have a partner, and now you have a partner who knows what they're talking about and can lay out all the options versus trying to figure it out on your own while still taking care of your regular responsibilities, adding this, and I hate to call it a burden, but it can begin to feel like a burden.
It definitely does. And you were saying something that's really important that people don't think about. You're saying you did it out of love, but there are cases where people are caregiving not out of love, but because they feel obligated. their relationship with their parent or other loved one is not optimal. And there's even more feeling of burden. There's even more feeling of resentment because they don't really want to do it, but they feel they have to. So having, again, someone like me help you through that to make what I call the complex easier makes it better. We are faced with so many different things that pull on us. Most people that are caregiving for their older parents likely have children that are young, or children who are in high school or university or college that still need their parents. They're likely working, or their spouse is working. And so they have that major relationship that they still need to nurture, plus their own life, their own interests, their own needs for socialization and spiritual growth and cultural interaction, and trying to figure out, how do I do all of this and care for my parent at the same time without feeling guilty and resentful and all of that? Because we aren't trained. We're thrust into it. And sometimes it is, you're at healthy parent and then an event happens and all of a sudden you are forced into it. There's no gradual buildup. It's just there. And now what do you do? One of the things that I think is really important, and it's tough, and I understand it's tough, is when your parents are healthy, have the conversation. Hey, what if? What would you want? What would you want if you couldn't breathe without intervention? Would you want the intervention? Would you want artificial nutrition? What kind of heroics, for lack of a better word, would you want or would you not want? At what point would you want somebody to say, okay, it's enough? Who do you want to make those decisions for you? And get that formalized in whatever way you need to do that. Get permission from your parent to have access to your medical records, because for a lot of situations, if you don't have that permission, doctor won't give it to you. And that's on both sides of the border. They are tough conversations that when somebody is healthy, you're thinking, why am I having this conversation? But 10 years, 20 years down the road, it's going to make such a difference in your ability to caregive for someone and to have dialogue. Because when those situations arise, it's like there's so many other things churning around that you just don't get to those. There's too many other things that may precede it. So that is my number one suggestion. You may say, my parents are perfectly healthy. Great. Perfect time to sit down with them and have that openness too. It also opens the door on both sides.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I found, and now I'm thinking about my husband, and this is when we knew he was sick. He already had a living will, but when you ask, do you want to have assistance in breathing, do all of those things, it's very hard even for us reversing that and thinking if somebody were asking me those questions, it's a little bit scary because you're thinking you're making a decision and it's set in stone and you don't know all of the variables at the time that you're doing that. And my husband said that he did not want assistance. And when the time came and I was not there, he was asked because he was able to speak and he changed his mind and said yes.
And that's the other thing, is that ability to change your mind is always there. If you decide that you want something different, then you can still change it. And that's another thing to speak about, is that you review these things on a regular basis, because you may think when you're 65, yeah, if this happens, I would not want intervention. Well, now you're 75 and you're thinking, well, no, now I might want something different, or I might want something less, because now there's medical assistance in dying. Oh, would I want that? Maybe I would. If I have this situation, now there's a whole other option that might have not been available 10 years ago that I would want. So definitely, like everything else, like a will, like powers of attorney, these things should be looked at every few years to say, yep, this is still what I want. No, it isn't, and update it.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, and I don't know if you get into this with your clients, but they really need to understand their parents' financial situation as well, because I've heard horror stories where they needed to access the money to pay for whatever the services are, and they're not able to. So that's, I know, a conversation that's difficult for all of us, and especially for the parent, because oftentimes, and understandably, they don't want to add the child and feel like the child will then, and I say child, but we're talking about grown, middle-aged people, most likely, will have access, or I assume
knowledge.
Yeah.
And even the knowledge. Yes.
It's, I mean, at least in my family, it's like, okay, we don't really talk about money. We don't talk about, all I know is, okay, mom is in a tenuous situation with money, but I don't really know the nitty gritty of what that is.
So that is definitely another aspect that the conversation needs to go to. Not that you have to know every penny, but you have to know, where are the bank accounts? Where is insurance documents? Who's the lawyer? Who's the accountant? If something should happen, that you know who to go to. And you have to get on bank accounts and all of that early enough, when the our parent still has the cognitive ability to do it. Because once they lose that cognitive ability, the door is closed.
Yeah.
So, and again, it is a tough conversation, but sometimes it's best had with a financial advisor, because when information comes from, I'll say, a professional third party, sometimes it's more easily listened to. If I gave my parents advice about certain things, they didn't listen. But if somebody else gave the exact same advice, oh, well, they said that. The banker said that. The doctor said that. The therapist said that, whatever. And I'm just like, great. When it came time for my mother to stop driving, I had her doctor tell her she has to stop driving. So she was angry at the doctor, and he doesn't bother him. I didn't want her angry at me. That worked out. And you know what? Yeah, he's a doctor. He has to do that by law. He has to make sure the roads are safe. So there are workarounds that people may not be aware of to get what you want through the back door.
Let me ask you, I know it's a big problem when people notice that their parents are deteriorating, whether it's mentally or physically, and they're living alone. And many people are resistant to have help.
Yes.
I mean, especially, I can understand that. You've been independent your whole life, and now all of a sudden to need assistance and to have your adult children question whether you're capable of living alone. I'm sure many people, and I can understand, would kind of bark back at that.
Yes. And that happens very often. Again, when they bring in somebody like me to sit down and say, let's look at your living situation. Let's look at your independence, your mobility, your socialization. And we literally go through it on a piece of paper. Do you need help with this? Yes, no. Do you need help with that? Yes, no. And then it's in black and white. And sometimes when you see it and you speak about it, it becomes more real. But I have had clients who, even when I can see so clearly they need help, and their kids are like, Mom and Dad, you need help, they still say no. And then what happens, unfortunately, is an emergent situation happens. And then I get the call, oh, you better come and help. Now I need this. Okay. And I'm happy to do that, but it is hard. And we think that we're infallible. We just do. And so having that realization that we're not It's tough. It
Yes,
is tough. But that's why having a third party, whatever that is, tends to make it more real. And if they have more than one third party tell them, it's hard to ignore.
absolutely. Great advice. Great advice. So let's talk a little bit about, because I know that you have personal experience with this, and nowadays, Alzheimer's and dementia, it's on top of our minds because
Yeah.
when we were kids, it was something I never even heard of, right? I mean, it wasn't even a topic of discussion. And nowadays, it just seems like so many more people are being diagnosed with these illnesses. Can you tell us what's the difference and some of the challenges that we face with it?
So you hear a lot of people say dementia and Alzheimer's on an equal footing, but they're different. You have to think of it. Dementia is like the word fruit, and Alzheimer's is like the word apple. Alzheimer's is one kind of dementia. There are others. If you're familiar with Bruce Willis, he has frontal temporal lobe dementia. It's different, and it has different symptoms and different outcomes. There's something called Lewy body dementia, different symptoms, different outcomes. There's vascular dementia, which is more to do with the circulatory system. But most people that have some kind of dementia, it's a disease of exclusion. They look for the other kinds. And when they can't find something physical, it's Alzheimer's. And every person's Alzheimer's journey is different. Some people go very slowly down the slope. Some people have symptoms, they stabilize, they drop significantly, they stabilize, they drop significantly. Everybody is different, but it affects the families similarly, doesn't matter. And with a lot of people in the beginning, the person is repeating or saying, I don't remember where my keys are. And like, Mom, you put them there. Like, I don't understand. Why don't you know? And we don't see it in the beginning. We just think it's lack of concentration or they're getting older, or whatever that is. And then as you see it progress and somebody puts that label on it, there's that guilt from people saying, oh, if I had only known, if I had not said what I said, now I feel bad for saying what I said. It's common. We all do it. And it is a challenge when somebody asks you the same question over and over and over. And my only suggestion to that is they can't help it. They're not doing it on purpose. Redirect. If they're asking the same thing, talk about something else to get their mind going in a different direction. And that generally will help. If somebody is saying the sky is purple, it's not for us to say, no, the sky is blue. It's to say, oh, yeah, which shade of purple is it? Because their reality is now their reality. My father used to say that he was living on the farm. My father never lived on a farm, but he always wanted to. And so I would say, so what are you doing on the farm? Oh, what is that like? Are you enjoying yourself? Are you having a great time? And it didn't hurt anybody. It didn't hurt anybody. That in that moment, that was where he saw himself. And as long as it's not hurting anybody, it's fine. But you see people who are in sort of more advanced stages that there's doll therapy and other things that people do. And for some people, it's like, oh, my parent is going back to their childhood. And in some ways they are, but that's their reality. And if they're playing with a doll and that's their child for them, it's their child. It's hard as the child of the aging parents when your parents get to a stage where they don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And to reconcile that, and they become possibly fearful of you because they don't recognize who you are. I suggest strongly is associating yourself with the Alzheimer's associations. They have support groups. There are people on Facebook, people online that are, just in that situation with you, that even if it's just for you to say, it was really hard today. I went to see my parent. It was really hard. And somebody can go, yeah, I get it. Just
Yeah.
having that peer support, if even not the professional, but even that peer support to say, I get it, is so helpful.
So helpful. I'm a big fan of support groups, and it is always just, it takes away that stress almost because you're sharing it with somebody else who understands, which is so nice. What about, how do you decide when is it time in that case with someone who has a form of dementia that it's unsafe for them to live alone? And what happens when, even if the professional says it's time, or maybe you have two different professionals who have different opinions, and then you have siblings who not everybody agrees with the doctor, with you.
Yes.
What do you
So
do? I mean, that's a sticky situation. And you so often hear those sad stories about how relationships have been ruined over caring and for parents and not agreeing.
it is so common, unfortunately, Debbie. It is so common. So when you need to start looking at options is when the parent starts wandering, when somebody is leaving and cannot figure out how to get back, when they become violent, and it happens. Unfortunately, it does happen where person becomes violent. I know of situations where the caregiver, for whatever reasons, their own reasons, just cannot do it. They can't do it. The thought of doing the activities of daily living for their loved one is more than they can do.
Yes.
At those times, you have to look for an alternative because then the level of care for that person diminishes. And you can't have that. A big part of it is the financial side. There's a lot of tension in families. Well, if we put mom or dad in a facility, do they have enough money for it to be maintained? Or is it going to take away from my inheritance? And that's a reality. And I hear it. Well, that's my money. And it happens in families. And you have one sibling that says, no, I think we should be spending the money on mom and dad. And the other one saying, no, I don't want to. It's hard. It is very hard. And when you were talking about professionals, everybody has an opinion of a situation. And you may get conflicting opinions. It also depends on the services you have where you live. If you live in an urban setting, you're likely going to have many more services than if you're in a rural setting. So that can define what you can and cannot do. The health of the kids. Some kids have their own health issues. They can't travel or they don't live in the same place as their parent. So who has eyes on the parent? And what happens in families is one child may live where the parents are. Another child is halfway across the country. And so the kid that's living where the parents are saying, but I see what's going on. You aren't here. You're not living it. And the other one's saying, oh, no, just hire a healthcare aide. It's good. It's fine. It'll be good. Or put them in a facility. It's good. It's good. But they don't have the responsibility of the ongoing daily care of that parent. What is the solution? The solution is to try and find the best solution given the circumstances. Having family meetings with the goal is the best outcome for the parent. Doesn't matter what you think is right, what I think is right, what they think is right. Let's sit down in the black and white and again, look at all the aspects, the money, the facility, the socialization. I hear a lot of people that say, I want to keep my parent at home because this is where they've lived for 60 years and this is the best place. So one of my questions is, are they going to have social interaction with other people? No, then this may not be the best solution. Is there going to be programming that can stimulate them and make the best of whatever situation they have? Are they going to have that arts and crafts and the baking and the singing and the other people to talk to in their home? And if they can't, is that the best thing for them? There's so many aspects that are rolled up in making that decision. I can't tell anybody off the cuff, do this or do this. And what I may see from it as an outsider, because of family tension, may not be what they do anyway. So there's no answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, at least you can be there actually, and I'm sure you do facilitate this discussion among siblings so that you can impartially lay out the facts and the options. And I'm sure that having a facilitator who's not emotionally attached and who's experienced in the field, I think would be very helpful if you have that situation where you're disagreeing with each other.
I will tell you, with my own parents, my mother had dementia earlier, and my father loved the house they lived in. He had his garden and he did his thing. And there came to a point where, for my mother, they had to move. And my father did not want to move. Did not. And they moved, and he had resentment for a very long time because it meant him giving up what he was capable of doing. And so what we had to do was try and replicate to the best of our ability what he had, the things he loved. He loved to garden. At the senior residence that he lived at, he ended up planting 300 tulips for them. He ended up planting tomatoes. He did what he loved doing in a different environment. And was it perfect? No. But again, you have to look at the needs of everybody, and not just the needs, I feel like Star Trek, not just the needs of the one, but the needs of the many. And it's true. And it's never going to be perfect.
No.
But you got to make the best of whatever that situation is.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Let's go back and talk about, just like your dad, he had resentment. I was the sibling who took care of my father and lived locally where my brother didn't. And my brother never said, he kind of left all the decision making to me because I was the one. So there was no conflict in that way. But so often on a daily basis, I would feel burdened with either having to go see my father every day, which I don't want to make it sound like a burden, but I've got to be honest. Like you said in the beginning, I had my job, I had my kids, I had my regular responsibilities. And when you added in this other responsibility and the difficult things that came with it, because he was not easy to deal with all the time, it was suffocating. And all those buckets, the one that was left out was me, like you mentioned, my own socialization, my own cultural, whatever feeds my soul was gone. That was the thing that suffered, right? That was the easiest thing to say goodbye to.
And that's the reason that when you're making that plan, that longer term plan of what to do, you have to factor in your ability to care give in relation to your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that there are lots of people, women, especially daughters-in-law, who feel like I have to be there every day. It's only me. Even the sons-in-law, whatever, they do their best, but we have had that role put upon us societally. That's just what it is.
Yep.
And if we don't go for a day, it's like, oh, the world is going to end. My loved one is not going to get what they need. So I think part of it is a mind shift for us, is to say, I am important. It's the airplane example. If you don't put the oxygen on yourself, you can't help your child or loved one beside you. We have to put the oxygen on ourselves. And it's tough because we're not socialized to do that. And when somebody says, it's okay, go and see that play, go and read that book, go away on a weekend vacation. I can't do that. Yes, you can. And it's getting that mind shift from I can't, exactly what you talk about, to maybe I can. It's calling in help that may not be your family. It may be that you're hiring somebody or having your loved one go to a respite location for a couple of days so you can go away. Or having your sibling who lives somewhere else, hey, you need to come here for a week so I can go and rest and relax. And especially in a situation like you had, where you had a spouse that had their own challenges that you had to deal with that on top. In addition, we can only do so much. All those balls in the air, something's going to fall, and it's likely us, because we're so
Absolutely.
worried about making it perfect for everybody that then how many caregivers die before the person they're caring for because they've made themselves sick.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think it's a very high percentage of caregivers that get sick, because that's the other thing. You don't have time to do your own doctor's appointments.
That's right.
Go exercise, do all the things that you
That's
need to
right.
do. Those are the things that go away. And from personal experience, what I found after caregiving for so many years for my dad, because I was a caregiver for 30 years, and especially once I had a family and my responsibilities increased, I was very resentful. And I found that I had a very short fuse with something ridiculous that would pop me, my anger. And because I didn't have an outlet. And I understand the oxygen mask analogy, but I don't think I really thought about it. I just felt that I didn't have a choice. And I think that as we wrap up, my message is you always have a choice, right? And Janice, you and I spoke before we came on about E plus R equals O. That's the choice. And I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but why don't you explain what I'm talking about there?
So this is a really insightful little formula that can help you everywhere in your life. So it's E plus R equals O. The E is the event. And we have events that happen that we have no control over. Things are just going to happen. We got to figure it out. The R is our response, and the O is the outcome. And sometimes what we need to do is look at, here's the event. Here's the outcome I want. What is the best way for me to respond to get the outcome I want? Because sometimes when it's a knee-jerk reaction, the outcome we get is not the outcome that we want. And sometimes we're lucky and we can go back and change the response to try and change the outcome. But in a lot of cases, that initial response is going to determine our outcome. As I was saying to Debbie earlier, sometimes when there's an event, we have to just pause and say, okay, this is what is. If I had the best outcome, what would it be, and how can I make it happen? And my suggestion is when those events happen, take that pause. And we get wrapped up, but if you can think in your head, okay, breathe. 2 seconds of breathing can totally change your outcome.
I love that. And for me, I didn't know the R part of the formula, or I don't think that I realized. I just assumed that the event equaled the outcome, that there was no R, there was no responsibility on my part. I didn't realize that I could affect the outcome in all situations, not just in caregiving situations. But for me, I felt like this is my life as a caregiver because of all these events that happened. This is the outcome. I'm burdened. I'm resentful. I'm wrong. We all have responsibilities. We all have challenges, but it's really our responsibility to make sure that despite all of those things, that we're still taking care of ourselves and making choices that are good for us as well as for those we care for.
Right. And in my mind, if the event is caregiving for someone, the outcome is feeling like you've done exactly what you wanted to do, how you wanted to do it, with no regrets. And the response is, I'm going to take care of my loved one. I'm going to take care of me so I can take care of my loved one, so that if something should happen where I no longer have my loved one, I feel like I am at peace with what I did. And that's going to be different for everyone, what that R is, but that's the outcome, is to say, yep, I took care of them. I took care of me. I'm good with what I did.
Absolutely. Great advice. Wonderful. Everything that you've shared has really been so helpful, I think, for so many people. Do you have anything else as we wrap up? Any other point that you didn't make that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think one thing that I'm going to say is you have to have a sense of humor. Things are going to happen and you're just going to go, this is absurd. And it's it. And I can laugh. And you just have to have that little bit of outlet of laughter and gaiety and joy. And if I can say anything that for me has been amazing, is create memories for you. Even if your loved one has dementia and 5 minutes after you leave, they forget you left, you didn't forget. Take videos, record voices, take pictures, because sometimes that's all you're going to have. And when you have those, and it can be sad, I'm not going to say that sometimes you see that sort of progression and it can be sad, but you will be so grateful that you created those memories. Have them write something out, draw a picture for you, whatever that is that works for you. Having those memories for you, I don't know. To me, that's the best thing I did.
I can understand that. My father passed away in 2011, so a very long time ago. I guess we had cell phones, right? I don't even know when we had cell phones.
Yes.
But I never thought about that. It's a wonderful, wonderful advice. And the laughter needs to be in every part of our lives. And some of the stories that I have with all of those that I've cared for, they're my best stories nowadays. And they make me smile. And they're things that now I have those memories. Sometimes something happens, right? And then it just reminds me of that fun, light time that I've had with my loved one. And those are the memories you want to keep in your mind. Yeah. Well, Janice, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I think that everything that we've discussed is important. And if it's not pertinent to you now, chances are it will be. Yep.
It will be. Yeah.
What's that quote? Now I forgot it, from Rosalind Carter. Either you are a
caregiver, you will be a caregiver, or you'll need a caregiver.
Yep, exactly. So I will put all of your contact information in the show notes, but if you can, just share with our listeners, where's the best place to find you?
You can contact me by email, janice@talkaboutaging.com. I have my website is talkaboutaging.com. I'm on LinkedIn, also just under my name, and I have a Facebook page under Talk About Aging. And at any time, I am happy to talk to people. My contact phone number and everything is accessible. And I give Debbie permission if she wants to give it out to somebody if they want to contact me. And even if it's just someone that needs to say, I'm up to my eyeballs, I need help, I'm happy to help.
Wonderful. Make sure to reach out and make sure to ask, because this is something that we don't do alone, right? We shouldn't do life alone, and we should not do caregiving alone.
No.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Janice, and everybody else. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening today. And remember, you've always had the power, my dear. You've just had to learn it for yourself. Until next time.